In a world that's loud, the church does not have to remain silent. In a world that's dark, the church can shine God's light. Welcome to Light Talks, where we dive deep into real conversations, not just echoing the world's noise, but shedding God's light on challenging topics. Let's talk. Welcome back to another episode of Light Talks. My name's Jonathan, and thank you for joining us as we talk about important topics for Christians in this world that maybe you're not hearing a lot of good conversation on. And today we have one of those topics. Today we have with us Pastor Bill, who's going to talk with us on the topic of talking about sex with our kids. And because we're talking about parenting and talking about a difficult topic with our kids, we also have Allie here with us.
Hey!
Because we need the whole perspective here from moms to dads, and then Pastor Bill's knowledge in this area. So we're going to talk about topics, as we said from the beginning, that maybe you're not hearing the church talk about. And today's topic is no exception. So we're going to give you a fair disclaimer right now that we're going to dive into this topic of talking about sex with your kids. That's going to include talking about anatomy. That's going to talk about having uncomfortable conversations. So if you're listening to this podcast or watching it and your kids are in the car in the back seat, you just might want to press pause and listen to this just as a couple, as parents, or individually. We just want to give you that fair disclaimer because we want to talk about topics that we need to be talking about in the church and in our Christian lives. So today is no exception. So welcome to Light Talks, Real Talk. Here we go. Pastor Bill.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's, well, I'll be honest with you. I'm probably just as surprised as the audience because I thought we were going to talk about superheroes today.
We had to get you here somehow.
Well, this is a little bit of, we can do it. We can talk about sexuality and gender and raising children up according to God's design. I'm prepared.
You're prepared?
I'm ready to go. Yeah.
And you're going to bring Batman and Superman into this somehow?
Oh, for sure. Some illustrations, because if there are children listening, which I think there might be opportunities for them to listen in, we will definitely talk about Superman, Lois Lane, Batman, teaching Robin about some things in life.
Okay.
Birds and the bees.
Okay.
It's more like the bats and the birds.
Okay. All right.
So I'm blessed to be here.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you for bringing a little humor into this, because this is a hard topic to talk about. And we have to be real about the fact that it's hard to have the conversations with your kids, to know when to have the conversations with your kids, and to know how to have the conversation with the kids. So you are the family pastor here at our church.
Right.
So this is a topic that's near and dear to your heart, just with your ministry. So you want to talk about
how do we get here? Why is it so important? Yeah. No, I think that's a good question. And just to share, first, as a parent, as a father, I have four, ages 20, almost 22 to 14. So as I share a little bit of some of the research things that I've maybe studied extensively in view of God's Word, I would love to say I'm perfect at this, but I'm right alongside any parent that's out there. It is awkward. It's tough to have conversations on this, but it is essential to really protect our children, to raise them up as healthy adults, and to encourage them especially to live out their Christian vocation, God's design for what is a core part of our identity, sexuality and gender. And having said, spoken about the importance of this, I think too, I find this disconnect between how the world is so ready to talk about it and in so many ungodly ways, and then this quiet context that we enter into with the church and the home. We're so afraid to talk about it. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement. So I'm when you guys said we'd love to talk about this, I was like, please, this would be great. So that kind of brings me here. I've seen and counseled a lot of families and children where sexuality and gender, there's confusion, there's development of some habits among our young people, which it just screams out, if we can apply God's Word to this, because God does talk about this throughout the Scriptures, then we'll be in a good place. So that kind of brings me here to this conversation.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I want to call out, too, maybe the listeners out there, maybe you have young kids and you're like, I'm not there yet. I think Pastor Bill would argue that you are. And maybe you have older kids and you're like, I've completely screwed this up already. And I think you have some advice for them as well. So don't tune out. If you are a parent, planning to be a parent, maybe a grandparent even, this conversation is definitely for you.
Right. Yeah, and I appreciate that thought too, because we're kind of changing the paradigm with a lot of good research that's been done, and a lot of good Christian counseling that's out there. Finding that this isn't just a one-time talk, which is probably why it's so awkward. But from 0 to 18, there are different strategic approaches to keep in mind, and when you blow it. And I'll be the first to admit I have this beautiful concept in the Christian church about confessing and just being open and honest and looking for grace. That really sets the stage. It kind of resets any day when you need to have that conversation. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of encouragement to be had with our talk.
Awesome.
Yeah, just thinking through my own life and my own parenting too. I kind of feel the same way. Like I don't know if I haven't. We've talked about it, but maybe not to the. I'm very eager to learn here today as well. I'm grateful for our church because we've had some series. One I think was called Sexpectations. Right. And I think there might have been the family home one or something. But there was some of our assignments from our sermons were talk to your kids about this, and we did, and it was really good. But we definitely haven't covered everything. So I'm very interested in this conversation today. So I know a part that you've mentioned is a big piece of this approach and starting this conversation is just being honest and open about proper terms for your anatomy.
Correct. Yeah.
So do you want to talk about why that's important? And
maybe to start from if we're thinking in terms of lifelong encouragement to our children and raising them up to be successful adults, and especially in Jesus to be light and salt, sexuality and gender, we've got to teach them, and no better place than the home, parents who love them, and with the church to come alongside and guide them in all of God's counsel. So we need to start talking to them from 0 on up. And so one of the best things, and this is recommended, you can Google this online, when you start talking about sex and gender, as early as you can. And again, proper anatomy, terminology is what's recommended. I have seen, I was thinking back to my past, and with my family, I don't think we talked about it much. So maybe this is a generation where we have to learn to be more intentional and talk about it. But I think my parents, if they used any terminology, it might have been like, hey, do you got to go to the potty? Because we're about ready to go on a trip. And I inherited that. So with my kids, and I've got a 22 and a 20-year-old, and when we go traveling, and we stop at Quick Trip a lot, I don't know if we'll get any encouragement, support, proceeds from their sales. But yeah, there's a bougie Quick Trip on the way to Kenosha from Appleton, and we'll stop there a lot, all the time. And whenever we do, I still to this day will say to my kids, hey, does anybody need to go potty? And they'll look at my 22-year-old, 20-year-old, and 18-year-old. They're like, Dad, really? Just how about the restroom? Anybody need to use the restroom? I say potty anymore. So, but I think about it and even in daycares, not just homes, but using terms like, your wee hurt, or do you need to use the restroom? Or this is probably why we had that disclaimer at first when we talk about something. So it is really important to kind of change the approach on that and use terms like penis and vulva and whatever else. Which, by the way, I thought as an activity, and for our audience, what I'm going to do, I've got a list of anatomically correct terms.
Ooh, audience participation.
Yeah.
Here we go.
I'm gonna say it. You repeat after me, and we'll do this for about 5-10 minutes, so we get comfortable.
5-10 minutes.
Okay. Right. No, I won't do that.
Okay, good.
But as part of presentations, and Julia Sadusky, I'll reference her again and again throughout our talk. Her works, Start Talking to Your Children About Sex, 0 to 9, and then her sequel, Talk to Your Teens About Sex. Great resources for Christian people. I do a whole review on myfamilytable.org. If you're looking for a lot of videos to have a critique and all these on her work, it's there for you. But yeah, the reason for correct terminology, kind of twofold. One, your children might have health issues, that come along in life as they mature, which they're concerned about. But if they always have this sense it's taboo to talk about, and we kind of mask the importance of these issues by using euphemisms instead of the appropriate terms, they might hide away. And, I've talked to my boys about testicular cancer and how to examine yourself so that you're aware of any bodily changes. I looked for Lori to kind of talk to our daughters about these things. So they're aware, so they can, if they're comfortable and you've used the terminology, they'll reach out to you and say, hey, I think something's wrong. And just wanted to, reach out. So health-wise, like that alone, I think, would suggest, let's use proper terminology.
It normalizes it.
Yeah, definitely. And we want to normalize it for sure. I think the other thing, too, is if they start using other terminology, then you know that someone's informing them outside of the home on sexuality and gender. So that's kind of one of those, let's talk about, where'd you hear, why are you calling that this? So those two reasons are compelling, 0 to 2 on up. I would say definitely after 2 for sure, use correct terminology. So
I remember an instance when I was real young, probably getting close to that puberty age, and I had pain somewhere. I don't remember where, but that was something I had to be able to describe to my dad, and in case there was an issue or problem. And I remember it being awkward because we really didn't talk about it much.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think my dad ever. Never had a conversation with my dad. My dad would kind of be like, "You all good? Yeah, I'm good, I guess, Dad. All right then, son, we're good."
Is that how he talked?
Yeah. Okay, maybe he didn't talk that way, but
this what you're talking about too. I'm a dad of 3 girls.
Yeah.
And even that instance I referenced, my mom said you need to talk to your dad about that. And I usually, when there's issues, when my girls hit puberty and their first periods and things, I wanted to know if something was wrong. Like one of them had some pain. Make sure talk to your mom about that, because I want to hear about it, but I can't there's got to be some boundaries there for, I think, some good boundaries still in place, but you still want to be able to have those conversations.
Yeah, for sure. And as they grow up too, if they're more comfortable, normalizing, great way. Normalize the conversation. Like, you'll talk about your other body parts, and if there's something that hurts, we want to get our kids comfortable to be able to talk about whatever, if they're ever hurting, or if they're being informed about things in their body that is not coming from the family, from the church. Yeah, these are helpful things to keep in mind.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why is it so awkward in the first place, right? We're trying to destigmatize these conversations, but why is it like that in the first place?
All right. See, now this is my bread and butter. This is what I like to talk about, because I think we'll get into the Bible a little bit, which
that's important. Yeah, that's good.
That's right.
Yes.
If I were to imagine Batman talking to Robin,
yes, we got superheroes in here. I was hoping.
And how does Bruce Wayne talk to what was Robin? he's a sidekick. He doesn't really.
He doesn't need a name.
All right. So I would suggest let's go to the scriptures, and I think this kind of speaks to why is it so awkward. So if you remember Genesis 1 and 2 and 3, the creation account, and humanity created as the crown of God's creation. And when he made them in his image. They were perfect, righteous, holy, capable of truly loving selflessly. Puts them together in marriage, and Adam looks at his wife Eve and says, "This is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh." And they were naked, and they felt no shame. And then all of a sudden, when the fall comes and they ate of the forbidden fruit, they now realized they were naked, and they tried to cover their shame. So something happened with the fall where this becomes awkward. Where in perfection it would be easy to talk about, because in innocence and in holiness we'd be able to truly share all things and to God's glory for the benefit of each other. So the fact that we can't really talk about this, or it feels awkward, I think it points us back to the fall and our corruption. And I'm going to even get a little deeper. This is more speculation, but I think it's interesting that we give extra special treatment, more reverence for particular parts of our body than others, and it deals with our reproductive organs. Mm-hmm. So why is that? So here's my speculation. God created us to be like him, to multiply, to give way to life that should be unending. But ever since we fell into sin, what do we beget and give birth to? It's children who are destined to die. So I think that's the shame a little bit that needs covering up, or needs special treatment, because our organs that God designed to give life and to multiply, now it only begets death. And there's this guilt and shame that needs to be addressed, which only God can cover. Like Adam and Eve covered with leaves, and it just didn't work out. But I imagine God probably sacrificed a lamb, and with lambskin, or I'm thinking about Jesus with his atonement for sin, covered them and blessed them. But that said, because God has redeemed all things, we should be able to talk about this in a reverential way, and it shouldn't be awkward anymore. So does that...
That's interesting.
Yeah,
I've not heard that theory before, but that is interesting. People will often say, like, they get married, like, do I really want to bring a kid into this world? Right. Like, even just like, oh, life in this world is terrible. Like, why would I want to do that? Yeah. But you still want to have kids. Yeah, that's an interesting, I've never thought about that.
Right. Well, and kind of as an extra conversation, and my oldest, right now, she's in a change of life. She's thinking about marriage and starting a family potentially, but she's had that same conversation. Like, I don't know if I want to bring kids in this world. It can be a scary place, but I love the fact that God redeems all things. So just as we should be able to talk about sexuality and gender, though there's this covering, God needs us to trust him, wants us to trust him, and part of that is to multiply, to be fruitful, to be light, salt in a world that really needs more Christian people.
Yeah.
So
I'm just thinking out loud right now. I'm gonna add on to your little theory. When you have this shame over your naked parts, in general, but there's one place that shame is kind of removed, and mostly removed is in your marriage. If your spouse, or you walk in on your spouse naked, you're like, you don't be like, you're not covering yourself or anything like that. Yeah. And doesn't Jesus use the illustration of the marriage as his relation to the church?
Yeah.
To the redemption that he won for the church, and remove that shame. In the marriage, if there's one place that your nakedness is not shameful, it's in your marriage.
Right.
I don't know.
No, and I think that's some good insight too, where why is it that even husband and wife, maybe when they're first married, it's kind of awkward, and it just seems like, okay, it might be because in our homes and in the church, we've been so silent. It's all been taboo until finally overnight, hey, you're married now. Now it's great. Now it's good. Well, maybe God's always been saying, hey, speak into this. Make sure it's not awkward, so that when they're married too, this can be a moment where, they kind of revisit the garden, and it's the garden in perfection, where Adam and Eve looked at each other, they were naked and they felt no shame. So I think the fact that God talks about this should encourage us. Yeah, we can talk about this, and probably even more so, we should be talking about it than the world. So,
wow,
interesting.
Awesome. Okay, so going back to, we talked about using correct anatomical terms. What other things do you encourage to establish as parents with younger children? I know I've heard you talk about this before, like house rules, appropriate touch. Let's talk about all that.
Yeah, so I think part of this, right, if we're talking about it regularly and we're raising them up to know that this is normal conversation, and we put up boundaries, and I think that's kind of what we're pointing at here. Parents, you can find natural opportune times to talk about anatomy and sexuality and gender when there's bath time, and when there's time to get your clothes on, change for the night, when there's doctor visits. So if you're aware of, like, okay, when they go to the doctor, they're going to have an examination and parents are present. So to encourage your child, like, this is appropriate. We're just going to make sure you're healthy. And so when doctors are present and parents are there, this is where you don't have to worry about being naked. We're going to make sure that you're taken care of. Bath time. So if you got siblings too, each parent's got to decide what they're comfortable with, and there's an age of innocence too where children can see each other naked. It's not a big deal or what have you, but they're going to have questions. And I think if you're open about talking and you're taking the initiative, then you're going to be able to help explain things appropriately, proper anatomy. I would caution, if you don't talk about these things and take the initiative, then when a child says, hey, why does my brother have this? And as a daughter, that's my conversation with my daughter and then my son. What is that? And if I respond by, hey, stop looking, don't, that's not a good question. That gives them that sense of shame automatically. And then now I've taught them, don't talk about this. It's taboo. So maybe from early on, I would suggest a few things. Talk about private and public areas. Like in private areas, that's where you can change clothes. In public areas, obviously, you want to stay clothed. Just as Jesus taught us in the scriptures in Genesis, there are certain areas of our body that we treat with extra respect. If others inquire about that, which is kind of a common thing among young kids, they want to show their body to someone else or get to see someone else's body. That's common, but you still want to correct that to say, no, there's certain areas and there's only certain times that some people are able to, see others that are unclothed. So boundaries, private areas, public areas, bath time, changing for bedtime, doctor time. Those are areas that are natural opportunities.
I've heard this question before. What would be your recommendation when you're a parent? There comes a point when your kids get too old to see you naked anymore. Or I know I've heard of people that struggle with that. And if I think back, I don't even remember because I have all girls, so it was most of the time anyway.
Yeah.
But when they were just baby, it's like they don't know any different. But is there a recommended age point where that should maybe start? Those boundaries should be put in place?
Yeah, I think this is where it gets kind of tough to dictate certain, approaches for families. This is just me personally. I would say 0 to 3, maybe 4. If anything, though, I had that same approach as I'm like, no, I never let my children see me without clothes on. Mm-hmm. But, they had bath time together and so on, too. So around 0 to 3, 4, we kind of started having them just so that they didn't feel uncomfortable. We respected their privacy. So I think each family has to decide that. But yeah, it's probably earlier than you would think. Just, again, and it's that balance of trying not to make it seem taboo, but also not to expose them to or burden them more than they're capable of handling, emotionally. So I don't know if that answers.
Yeah, you probably know your kids better than anyone. And when is that getting to be that point? So maybe a lot of this is just thinking out loud and reacting. Because so basically, if I remember a video where a kid, I think it kind of went viral. A mom was videoing her son, and the son was like, "Mommy, I have a penis. Do you have a penis?"
Right.
So obviously he was inquiring about this understanding and knowledge.
Yep.
And I don't know if she was very specific to say no. Or maybe she. I don't remember. But if she said, no, mommy has a vagina actually.
Yeah.
So if there's a proactive on the kid's side to just say it, just answer the question directly.
Yeah, honor questions and really praise. I'm glad you're thinking about this and to bring it back to God too, to say, God created us very special. So boys have penises, girls have vaginas. And part of that is you'll learn a little bit later, too. These are gifts to us so that we can have more children one day. When you have a family, when you get married, this is the way that God blesses us. So these are special things. But for now, maybe we'll just kind of put that on the shelf. We can talk about it later when you're able to understand more. I think part of it, too, maybe this is an approach for parents. How do you initiate conversations? And if you think in terms of all right, 0 to 2, proper terminology, 0 to 5, 5 to 7, 0 to 7, safety and respect for one another's bodies and personal boundaries, privacy, public areas. After 7, you start talking about changes in the body, puberty and so on, that so they're not shocked and scared like when things change and they're like, am I hurting? Do I need to go to the hospital or whatever? If we're proactive with that, then these conversations, they won't surprise us and we'll be able to encourage them like, yeah, you're thinking great thoughts and we give thanks to God for how he's made us and you're special. God has designed you with a lot of worth and purpose. So, and we'll talk about it as you get older.
Yeah, so what you're saying is there are age-appropriate conversations. So you're not saying like, you are 3 years old, let's talk to you about how sex works.
Yeah, they might have questions like, well, where do babies come from? And my go-to is like, well, a stork brings them.
You're a great pastor.
Yes.
I like to talk about fairy tales. No, so I would caution, don't say the whole I don't know if people do that anymore. But you would say, all right, well, this is kind of like when Batman sat Robin down. It's like, so this is what happens, birds and bees. When a man loves a woman, that kind of thing. But honestly, you can say, so God created men to be able to give a part of themselves, to a woman who's able, with her body, to, create a human being. And it's beautiful. And as you get older, you'll start to grow into more of an understanding with that. But I'd like to encourage parents to say, do you have any more questions? To really invite that.
Yeah.
Like, I
invite
welcome
the
whatever.
conversation. Yeah.
So proactively, too, let's say you find out they've been exposed to something, they're talking in new ways, and you're like, oh, to see, like, what are they thinking to be proactive. Like, maybe you're watching a TV show and there's some kind of issue that pops up, sexuality, gender, and like, oh, here's a teaching moment. You got two options. You can kind of be passive and not say anything and just ignore it, turn the TV off. Or I would encourage, you could say, hey, what'd you think about that? Did you see how that man was talking to that woman, or that man was talking to another man, and there was kind of some romantic things that were going on? What does God's word say about that? And so if it's something that we can praise, then praise it. If it's something that we want to say, isn't it interesting, the world often has different views than God has. And, we're safe when it comes to what God says. So I would say be proactive. If at age 9 or, you want to talk about puberty, you might say, hey, have you noticed any changes with your body as far as your sexuality, your gender, and they should know that terminology by then, or to say, if you notice any changes at night with your penis or your vagina, things of that nature, I would encourage parents, prompt them. And if they say no, or if they look at you like, I'm good, they say, okay, well, if you ever have questions or if you ever want to talk, you can come to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking about with you talking about that is a lot of it right now is reactionary, like when they bring something up or when you see something.
Yeah.
What I've often heard about is the sex talk, which is almost like a, all right, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk. Almost like when is that point where you have to, in a sense, say, all right, it's on the calendar on Friday at 6 p.m. We're sitting down. We're going to tell you all about sex.
Yes.
Do people do that anymore?
Is that it's an honest question. Is that the right approach? When?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'll give you 2 examples of my own life.
Okay. All right.
So when I was probably 3rd grade, I've got 2 older brothers, 3 and 5 years ahead of me. So we're driving to church, and this is great. Obviously, when you drive your kids in a car, you got a captive audience. You can talk about whatever you want. Superheroes or
they
whatever.
can't run away.
Yeah,
they can't.
Yeah, they're stuck.
So please make it as awkward and cringeworthy as possible. That's my go-to. And that just comes naturally for me. But my mom, I could tell there was something, like she wanted to talk about something. And then so finally she kind of blurts out, turns the radio down. I don't know if it was Aha, Take On Me, or whatever was playing in the background in the 80s. She's like, so how about your bodies?
Oh.
Like, how are you feeling these days? And again, you got like a 12-year-old, maybe a 9-year-old, and then I must have been 5 or something. So maybe it was maybe a little bit older. But I remember the conversation because it was just weird. And then she kind of adds, there might be times of sex or self-exploration. So she didn't say sex, but self-exploration, which is normal. I'm just like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Because you're young at this point.
Yeah, and maybe my brothers did. And as I reflected back on it, I was like, oh, turns out that there's some things that had happened in our extended family, and she wanted to kind of be proactive. So God bless her. It was great. And if that was more common, then it wouldn't have been such a surprise. And I wouldn't have remembered. Since it didn't really go well, we're like, we're good, and let's listen to the radio. Hey, what do you think pastor's going to talk about at church? Well, pretty sure it's not going to be talking about this, but that was kind of how I thought. So I think I inherited that. Again, my dad never really talked about. I think it was just a generational thing. He just didn't talk about, right? So I decided, well, with my boys, when they hit 7th grade, we're going to have the talk.
7th grade. 7th grade. That was your...
That was... And nobody taught me that. And this was like when I first got to 922 Ministries. So I didn't dive in yet to family ministry specific things like sex and gender issues. So I took Luther. Yeah, that's my son's name. Because I'm a Lutheran pastor. So I took him over to my office, and I'm like, we're going to have the talk.
Your office?
Yeah, it's
at
my
church?
office. Yeah. Well, because he's got younger siblings, and I didn't want him to be embarrassed about whatever. So I talked about the birds and the bees. And I was like, so you have any questions, Luther? And also I said, yeah, internet issues and pornography and all that. I'm like, this is things. So, this is where we're going to put covenant eyes on your devices and things like that too. This age, this property. And God bless my son. He was like pale as a ghost. Like, okay. We good? Can I go play Fortnite again or whatever? So I realized then, and then come to find out later, I should have been having these conversations all the way along, But that's also when I talked about health issues and when you're changing to make sure you know how to examine yourself. And, if there's ever an issue, come to me, which to my credit, I'll pat myself on the back. I did say this because it's such a, this issue, right? There's that shame and guilt that naturally comes. And Paul talks about that too. Sins against the body kind of are of a certain degree in the sense of guilt and shame. So I kind of made a deal with my sons. If you ever are in trouble, if you're ever doing things or something is taking a hold of you that's of this nature, a sexual nature, and you need help, no consequences. You come to me. I will help you. Don't worry about losing your phone or being grounded or what. You come to me. Now, if I find out other ways too, then that might be a different matter. But you come to me, there's just grace. So I would encourage that too. If we can especially remove the taboo nature of this, that's good for our kids.
So what I'm hearing is if you're starting the conversations and talking as they're growing up, you probably never need to have the full birds and bees talk because it will be already part of all the conversations that you've added up over the years of their growing up.
Yeah. And that seems to be the prevailing thought today. And it is biblical. Like the Song of Solomon, Song of Songs, it's a whole book on romantic love, intimacy there. God's not ashamed to talk about it. He designed it. So we should talk about it all the way through their lives at age-appropriate ways so they're not burdened beyond what they need to at certain ages. But, yeah, then my son, he would have never had to go to my office and have that awkward talk. And, yeah.
What things, so this whole episode is about how to talk to your kids about sex. So, let's say they get to that point, and you need to get more in detail. What, subjects should they be covering? Do you have any tips and tricks? Because it's still awkward, regardless. And what if they just stare at you like a ghost anyway? Even if you're like, this is totally cool.
This is what's interesting. I wonder if it has to be awkward, and I think it is right now. If hands down we're saying, hey, I wasn't raised to talk about this, which I think is our experience and previous generations. But if we can start from 0 to 2 to 5 to 9, and I think, too, the transition is more so just for health issues, excretory, urinary processes, systems of the body, biological, kind of up through age 7, 9. And then you start to talk about more of the reproductive nature of things as they get older. That seems to be, the prevailing wisdom of the day. But then you're already planning the idea of hey, for men, in your anatomy, you're created to give semen, seed to a woman who, by God's design, is your wife, and then you're able to create human life, and she's ready to receive, and during the monthly cycle, the egg will be fertilized, will settle into the uterus. You can talk about this.
Sure.
With appropriate anatomical terms. I don't think it has to be awkward. And when they hit puberty too, and you start talking about feelings and emotions, you can talk in terms of your desire will grow. You'll notice this for generally it's the opposite gender. By chance, because of our sinful corruption too, sometimes our desires can, just be directed toward someone of the same gender or other things. So if you're noticing feelings that you're feeling guilty about and ashamed about, please talk to me. I'll be able to relate more than you know. Things like that. And I don't know. I think you'll be able to read your kids, their body language. If they feel uncomfortable, you can say, hey, looks like we're probably good with our conversation now, but I'd like to revisit this with you. So let's go play Fortnite.
Let's go play Fortnite together.
Love it. So you teach them about sex, but then right now they have all these feelings. Potentially, maybe they're in high school, maybe they're in college. God's designed for marriage and sex within marriage, but they're going to have all these feelings, and the world tells them differently, right? So how do you have that? Because I think generation-wise, it was like, no, sex is bad, don't do it. And so how do you have that conversation in a positive way that makes them not like turn the other direction?
Yeah. I think those are good questions. By the way, this is a different trend in Christendom, in the Christian church at large. And it's kind of talked about in two respects. It used to be the purity culture, where it's like, no, we don't talk about this. And, abstain. And so a lot of the values that we see in scriptures, but we'll talk about it maybe when you're married, or you'll figure it out on your own. Versus a holistic or kind of an integrative view of sexuality and gender, where if we're talking about these things all the way along, they're going to be more and more comfortable and opening up to you about it, which actually with some of my kids, sometimes I'm like, okay, I don't want to talk about this with you. Mm-hmm. But it's really great because they'll bring things up. Yeah. So, I think when it comes to like dating, so if we're talking about the teen years, I would have a conversation like, hey, you're 12, 13. A lot of your friends are maybe already dating. Let's talk about dating. What questions do you have? What do you know about dating? And that's one of the, I think, best approaches I've found is just be a Columbo. Columbo, do you remember?
Yes.
Ask those questions.
What is Columbo?
Yeah, he was a detective.
And he looked like an idiot all the time, but he was actually really smart.
He was really smart, but he was the guy in Princess Bride. He was the grandpa.
Okay.
Yeah. Great show.
Anyway. Yeah. So if you ask questions, you can say, so how many of your friends are dating? What do you think about that? And then bring them back to the scriptures. Like, well, if we're talking about dating, we're talking about relationships that are built somewhat on romantic feelings, intimacy, is kind of the fulfillment. So what would that suggest from the Bible? That, you're thinking marriage thoughts. So if you're not ready to get married at this age, I don't know if dating's for you. And just interesting stats. I always think about this. I always ask this of our 8th graders because I teach them confirmation class and the basics. We talk about 6 commandment issues, sexuality, gender. So I'll ask, like, any of you dating? And like hands go up, like, yeah, they're all, no, not me, but that guy. And he likes her or whatever. And I'm like, okay, you don't need to rat people out. But there's a 4-year countdown. I call it the 4-year countdown. And I didn't come up with this, but research has shown that when people start dating, start to become, intimate more, holding hands, kissing, there's a 4-year window where you start expressing yourself as a married couple. So you start having sex after 4 years of dating. It doesn't matter how many people you date, you kind of pick up where you left off. So and asking, hey, what are you dating for? What's your purpose? And they're always sheepish about it. They're like, well, we're just being friends with people of the opposite gender. I'm like, well, you can be friends. That's not dating. And they're like, oh, kissing, hugging. And like, okay, so here's the 4-year countdown. If you're not ready to get married by age 16, 17, 18, you might not want to start dating. So, but that's for you to have a conversation with your parents about. So I don't know if that kind of... that's another addition to the conversation.
Yeah, to keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
That's just really insightful. I don't know if I've heard that, but that makes sense. That if you're 18 years old and you start dating at the end of high school-ish, just to say, by 22-ish,
you'll probably want to be married.
You're going to be serious about marriage by the time, which seems to be about the right trend. Yeah,
and it is. It's when you presented this, Pastor Bill came and talked to a mom's group about this, and you would talk to like mom after mom. They're like, "Yep, that's about right." Thinking through their own experience, and they're like, "Yep, that 4 year, that's so real." Yeah,
right. And if the average age for marriage today is 27 for women and 29 for guys. Among the Christian community, we have a lot of evaluating to do. Like, do we want to set up our children to wait until they're 23, 24, 25 to start dating? Or do we want to encourage marriage and really teach what it means to be married in God's sight, and what that even means, Christ and the church relationship, and so on. We need to have these conversations. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
I want to get to the topic of gender identity yet, but to kind of maybe close this out, while you're talking, I'm thinking about someone I knew back at my former church that I had a lot of respect for. And one day, it was after the church service, and they were having kind of, as people were walking out of church, they were kind of having a disagreement in the aisle.
Okay.
And the dad started walking away from him. And I heard my friend say, "You don't walk away from me while we're talking. You taught me better than that." Oh. And I had just a huge amount of respect for him because he respectfully called his dad out on something that his dad taught him.
Okay.
Like, we talked something through.
Yeah.
I come to find out later, just more as I got to know them, that they talked as a family about honest things all the time. Mom and dad have sex. Okay. You know, for one, I've always wondered, why is that such a gross thing?
Yeah.
Why has that been pictured as so gross? Ew, don't tell me that, when that's a God-pleasing thing. But what I kind of learned from him just in general is having those open, honest, loving, respectful conversations continuously, which I understood from their whole upbringing. Oh yeah, mom and dad talked to us about penises when we were very little. You know, like, that was just normal.
Yeah.
Making that normal in a God-pleasing, respectful way helps bring our kids onto the right path to live their lives and have that respect for sexuality and marriage and everything long term.
Yeah. And if you think about it to that point, it's like it's one of the greatest gifts God has given for us in this life to be fruitful and multiply, to better society, to win more souls. So if it's such a great gift, like, why would we be ashamed to talk about it in a reverential way? And especially to help our kids, where if we don't talk about it, well, let's talk about some of the darker sides of it. We could be setting them up for a life of addiction, of a sexual nature, which, by the way, the less you talk about it, the more taboo it is, the more forbidden fruit it is, the more they're going to be prone to falling into that temptation. Or how about sexual abuse? And this is where, too, another disclaimer, if throughout our conversation, this is stirring up feelings for people where it's just you're not comfortable, feel free to pause, come back to it, and revisit these things. And we're here for encouragement on these issues and providing counseling and so on too. So, but if we want to help protect our daughters especially, but also sons, like 1 in 9 girls are sexually abused by age 18, 1 in 20 boys. Stats are around that. Ages 16 to 19, you're 4 times as likely as a female to be raped, to be sexually abused. So these are real deep-seated issues. And if the power in protecting is in speaking. So if we can have our young people know what are the signs and who are the predators that are out there, which, by the way, only 7% of these crimes happen from strangers. Most victims, they're victimized by people they know. So we're talking about now like sleepovers and family, relatives' houses, and all these things, if we can help them and grow in how to protect themselves and to be strong, which I'll ask you guys, what do you think is the number one reason for why sexual abuse happens?
Past abuse?
Okay, yeah. So it is inherited a lot of times too. So those that victimize are oftentimes first victims. So why our children aren't ready to maybe protect themselves or call things out is just for being polite. We teach our children to be polite, and that's a great virtue. But in this regard, we have to teach them to not be polite. So things like this, you have a conversation with your family, your kids, parents. How comfortable are you in letting your children not give hugs to adults if they don't want to? I would encourage you, that's worthy of a conversation. Let them have some independence about who can, enter into their personal space. Grandmas, grandpas, whatever. And have a conversation with extended family, too, to say, hey, these are the ground rules that we're setting up. Because we know that, being polite can often get kids in trouble. Another thing, too, if somebody is an adult and they come to your child and say, hey, I got a secret, just between us. Maybe as a family say, hey, there's no secrets in our household. There can be surprises, but we tell everybody. the birthday surprise or whatever. So there's no secrets that are kept from mom, dad, child. So a lot of practical advice to be given for protecting our children. So
love that. All right. Well, I think our time is about wrapped up, but I have one last question for you.
Okay.
What is one small actionable step a parent listening today could take this week to begin or continue these conversations with their kids?
Yeah, I would say get a good resource and dedicate your time to just investigating possibilities that are out there. I had mentioned Julia Sadusky's, start talking to your kids about sex, or how to talk to your teens about sex. So myfamilytable.org, I have video reviews of her work. I think we're going to have a resource that maybe is attached to this, just kind of summarizes when to have what conversations at what age. So I think that maybe to key off of what you said before, if we can normalize this, think in terms of more than just the talk, but millions of conversations, 0 to 18, natural opportunities, making our kids feel comfortable, knowing that you are a safe place to talk on these issues. So if you do all of that and you still have questions, maybe I'd give it another thought. Because maybe you're in the middle of it right now. You don't have time to read a couple books or whatever. Try to visualize a conversation, rehearse a conversation, and think in terms of a question. Like, hey, I noticed there's been some internet activity that was a little bit off, and I thought I'd just ask you, what are you looking at? What are some things that you're finding online? By the way, you can tell me anything. Here's a free pass. You're not in trouble. I just want to help and protect you. So maybe that's part of it. Yeah, have you heard of the AI?
The robots.
Yeah, the robots, those magical robots that are online. I'll use this at ChatGPT. I'll just put in a prompt, hey, I need to talk to my kid, age 14, about sexuality and gender. What are ways that I could do that? And it'll kind of tabulate some thoughts for you, and it's kind of helpful. The Christian community, have conversations with each other, fellow parents, talk. Ask your pastors about how they would approach things. That's awesome. 3 things.
Yeah.
That was, I asked for 1, but you gave me 3. I'm
a giver.
That's amazing.
I'm pretty generous.
Yes. Yes, you're awesome. So we will have the links to those books that you shared about, to that resource in the podcast description for any listeners to click on and learn more from. So thank you for those resources.
Yes.
Thanks. Well, thanks for having me.
We could have another 4-hour conversation on all this, but thank you for at least opening the door to just give us things to think about. I know as a parent, it's given me just a lot of things to think about in general. So thanks for being here.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. And again, I don't want to come off as like I've got this all down perfect. I think if anything, I just encourage you, if you feel like you've fallen short, I'm the first that has. That's why Jesus came. Grace, right? You're loved, you're forgiven. Every day is a new day. And through this confession and forgiveness, we can start conversations at any age with our kids, and they're going to be blessed by it. So don't be afraid, and go to Jesus when you need that power and that strength and that grace.
Amen.
Thanks for that. And thank you all for joining us here on another episode of Light Talks. Again, check in the description below for resources, a place where you can drop your own questions. We love having real conversations here. So thanks for being here, and we'll see you on the next episode of Light Talks.